occasion to be hosting this webinar on behalf of the Academy of Science of South Africa. I can see the numbers of people participating is growing, which is testament to the fact that the topic and the speakers are well acclaimed and are going to do us a great deed by sharing their insights on this particular topic of artificial intelligence and the way in which ChatGPT, etc., is growing into our psyche. Just a few words on the Academy. We are all about using evidence-based science in the service of society. We have a number of different programs, and the program we're participating today is from the Scholarly Publishing Unit, headed by our esteemed colleague, Mrs. Susan Falsman. And we have many, many products, which I'm sure you could see on our website. But I don't want to chirp about all of that, but get into the nitty-gritty of today's topic. And I wish to welcome you all. I wish to thank the speakers in advance for availing themselves. I know how busy you all are, and it is indeed a great pleasure for us to be hosting you. And we look forward to hearing your insights on the topic. We previously had an ASSAf Presidential Roundtable on a similar sort of a topic. And I was just saying to colleagues earlier, I wish I could use the AI to do some of the work that's on my desk today. But yep, we still have to forge ahead. And without no more interruptions, I wish to thank you all, thank my colleagues, and back to you, Ina. Thank you very much for the opportunity to start the meeting. All the best. Bye.
Thank you so much, Himla, and I agree with that AI tool which can assist with all the work we have to do, but my life is becoming easier and easier. I'm going to hand over to Professor Mike Lambert, who's going to be moderating this session and take us through the panel discussion. Thank you so much, Mike. Over to you.
Thanks, Ina. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome everyone to our seminar on AI in publishing. I really think this is so topical, and there's tea room, talk in the corridors about it. So it's something that I think is going to serve many different needs and interests. Now, I've been asked to chair the session. I'm by no means an expert in AI. I'm the editor of a journal, so I can see how this is going to really impact how we do our work in the future. So I will do my best to draw the information out of the experts, and hopefully in the Q&A, we will really have a good discussion and get some practical information. So as the publishing industry evolves in response to the technological advances, it's crucial to explore the opportunities and challenges presented by AI. From content creation to distribution and marketing, AI is transforming the entire publishing process. In this seminar, we'll delve into the latest trends and developments in AI, examine its potential impact on the publishing industry, and explore case studies of successful implementations. So whether you're an author, a publisher, or technology enthusiast, I think this seminar will provide valuable information to keep you ahead of the curve and gain insights into the future of publishing. In recent years, the impact of AI on scholarly writing and publication has been significant. AI tools have enabled the automation of various aspects of the writing process, such as grammar and style checks, plagiarism detection, and even content generation. These tools are designed to save time, improve accuracy, and enhance the quality of scholarly writing. Additionally, many publishers now use AI-based systems to screen submissions and assess their quality, making publishing research papers and articles easier. Yesterday, as I was preparing for this, I was playing around with ChatGPT, and I cut and pasted an abstract from a new submission to our journal into ChatGPT, and I just asked it to critique the abstract. And, it whirled away for about 30 seconds and then came up with a list of about 6 amazing points that were very relevant. And, it exceeded my expectations about what it could do. And I just thought how useful this is going to be to provide a basis for reviewers before they really start investing too much time into the paper. They can just do a quick overview like that and then start putting their personal touch to the review as well. So just playing around with it for a few minutes, I can just see the impact it's going to have on publishing. Now, while concerns have been raised about the potential for AI to replace human writers and editors, it is clear that AI can be a valuable tool for scholars and researchers who wish to explore their writing and publishing processes. So I think we have to learn how the tool operates and then embrace it so that we can, take full advantage of the opportunities that it offers. Now, we've got 3 highly trained experts who will each speak for 20 minutes on their specific topics. And this will really set the scene where I think much of the action and learning will take place, and that is in the Q&A session. So we hope that there's going to be engagement. We've got lots of points we would like to discuss as well. So stick around, I think, learn the basics from the experts and then be fully prepared to participate in the Q&A session at the end. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Professor Tommy Meyer. Professor Meyer is a highly accomplished academic in the field of computer science. He currently serves as a professor at the University of Cape Town, where he also directs the Artificial Intelligence Research Unit and co-directs the National Center for Artificial Intelligence Research. Prior to joining UCT, he held academic positions at several prestigious institutions, including the CSIR in Pretoria, National ICT Australia, and it's now Data 61, the University of New South Wales in Australia, the University of Pretoria, and the University of South Africa. Professor Meyer is one of only 3 South African computer scientists to have achieved an A rating from the South African National Research Foundation. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with these ratings, the National Research Foundation offers ratings, and anyone who's able to get an A rating has to be recognized as an international leader in their field. So this is testament to his excellence in research and scholarship. He's a member of several professional bodies and is highly regarded by his peers for his contributions to the field of computer science. So thank you. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Professor Meyer.
Thank you very much, Mike, for that introduction. And thank you to ASSAf for the invitation extended to me to chat to you today about the impact of AI on scholarly publishing. So I have a bunch of slides here. Let me see if I can open those up. Let me see. Okay, I just want to make sure that you can see my slides.
Yes, all good. Thank you,
Yes,
Tommy.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And then I'll go ahead. So yes, as Mike said, my name is Tommy Meyer and I'm currently at UCT, but I'm also involved with the National Center for AI Research. So let me get right into it. Although, if I go back to the previous slide, the title of the webinar is AI and Scholarly Publishing and Writing. And the title of my presentation is that, in trying to give the basics. I am acutely aware of the fact that most people, when they talk about AI these days, they're referring to machine learning, which is a sub-area of AI. So I'll say a little bit about that, but more specifically, I think the main reason we're here this morning is because of ChatGPT and similar chatbots. So I'm going to cheat a little, and most of my slides, most of my presentation will actually be about chatbots and ChatGPT, not about AI in general and its impact. I will say a little bit about that, but I really think that the whole question of the broader field of AI and how it can affect scholarly publishing would be the topic for a separate webinar. And as I was saying, I'm pretty sure that most people have ChatGPT or something similar on their minds at the moment when they're talking about this. So with that, let me start with that. I think if you've opened any newspaper or looked at the internet in the past couple of months, it would have been almost impossible not to see something about ChatGPT and chatbots. I know there has been an ASSAf webinar about this, the presidential discussion that was talked about a little earlier. But the typical thing that you would see if you open a newspaper, for example, would be something along these lines that I have on the slides. So this was a New York Times article talking with the author talking about the fact that it had a conversation with ChatGPT essentially, which left him very unsettled. Amongst other things, the chatbot declared its love for him. Now, sounds very strange and interesting. And of course, what we're talking about here is mostly ChatGPT. So ChatGPT is a tool that has been developed by OpenAI. It is underlying the chatbot used to be something called GPT-3. The next version is now out, GPT-4, and I'll say a little bit more about the basics underlying all of this in a minute or two. But like most people, of course, one of the first things that you do, if it's possible to do so, if you hear about something like this, is you go to ChatGPT and you try it out. And that's exactly what Mike said as well, right? So he played around with it a little bit. So I of course, like many other people, have done the same thing. And here is at least one conversation or at least one question that ChatGPT answered. I asked ChatGPT who I am. So Tommy Meyer works in artificial intelligence. Who is he? And I'm not going to read through all of this, but I want to lift out one or two things because I think it is pertinent to our discussion this morning. So ChatGPT says that I'm a prominent researcher and academic in the field of AI. Okay, that sounds wonderful, you know, from my side. It's true that I'm a professor of computer science at UCT, but I have not been on the faculty since 1988. So ChatGPT got that wrong. It's a little hard to figure out where the 1988 came from. I joined UCT in 2015. In 1988, what was I doing then? I was busy probably with my master's. So I'm not quite sure where that date came from. Then it also says that I'm a fellow of the ACM, the Association for Computing Machinery, which is not quite true. I'm a member, that's true. And it says that I'm a fellow of the South African Computer Science Association, which is not true because there isn't such an association. There's an association called SAICSIT, the South African Institute for Computer Scientists and Information Technologists. And there is an association called SACLA, the South African Computer Lecturers Association. So it muddled things up a little bit there. And then it went on to, then it goes on to say some things that kind of true, they're a little bit vaguish, but they could be regarded as true. So I'll come back to, you know, these strange mistakes that ChatGPT are making in a minute, even though a lot of what it says is useful. So what is ChatGPT and what are these kind of systems, these chatbots in general? So I'm not going to go, of course, into lots of technical details here, but what I want to say is that, and I'm sure you may have heard this term being bandied around as well. ChatGPT is what is known as a large language model. So a large language model is a very large version of what is known as a language model, large being that it takes lots and lots and lots of information in. So there's a nice pretty picture that I have on the slide for you here. And the idea is that you've got data coming in from the one side, whether this is text or images or speech or structured data or various signals. The model is being trained on this, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes. And then this information is used in some way to perform various tasks, whether it's question answering or sentiment analysis or information extraction. It's essentially getting answers out of the tool. Very roughly speaking and very broadly speaking, a large language model is a probability distribution over sequences of words. So most of you, I assume, would have cell phones or mobile phones, and you would have come across autocomplete, right? So you start typing a word, and the phone tries to finish it for you, even a sentence. Now, one way, it's not the only way, but one way to think about these large language models is it's just a souped up version of autocomplete. It's, in other words, if it finds a sequence of words, if it's given a sequence of words, it tries to guess what is the most appropriate way to complete that or to provide that as an answer. Now, as I say, I know that's a very rough, high-level way of looking at it. And of course, there are lots of technical details underneath all of this, but that's in essence what it is. Now, large language models, certainly these days, are based on what is known as deep neural networks. So a neural network is a computer science tool. These tools have been around since the 1960s, and they are essentially classifiers. Classifiers in the sense that you provide information on one side, you can train this, and then it classifies things on the other side. So you have an input layer where you get information going in, and then you have an output layer where typically on a very high level, you can view this as classification. So a very simple example, you might give lots of images to a neural network, and on the other hand, it might tell you coming out, it might tell you whether something is an apple or not an apple, where the different images that are coming through. Now, the reason these neural networks these days are called deep neural networks is because of the number of hidden layers that you have going from the input to the output. And what this essentially means is that these mechanisms, these tools are being used to come up with these probability distributions that I was talking about. Now, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a fair chunk of the AI researchers in the world, it's certainly not, there's certainly not consensus about this, but in my opinion, the real surprise underlying deep learning, and therefore these large language models as well, it was very well articulated by my colleague Adnan Darwish, who phrased it as such. He said that some tasks typically associated with perception or cognition can be approximated to a reasonable extent by fitting functions to data. Now, this is just a technical way of saying that frequently what we think of as what seems to be real deep thinking by machines are really just fitting functions to data. They're extremely useful and extremely impressive, but we should not confuse it with real thinking. And I think that's very important when we go through and try to assess what to make of chatbots, such as ChatGPT. Now I'm going to give you a couple of opinions on questions that we were given beforehand. We were asked to kind of weave this into our presentations. But before I give you these opinions, so this is on chatbots and on AI in general, I want to make what I would like to refer to as the Newcomb disclaimer. Now, the picture I have on the slide in front of you here is of a Scottish mathematician called Simon Newcomb. He was a well-regarded mathematician in his time. And on the 22nd of October, 1903, he made the following statement about man-powered flight. He said that may not our mechanicians be ultimately forced to admit that aerial flight is one of the great class of problems with which man can never cope and give up all attempts to grapple with it. So essentially what he was saying at that point is that there's no point in trying to design machines that can fly because it's not going to be possible. And of course, as we all know, you may not know the specific date, but less than 2 months after he said this, the Wright brothers did exactly what he predicted was not possible. So on the 17th of December, 1903, we had the first controlled, sustained flight of a powered heavier than air aircraft. So the reason I want to make this disclaimer is because the experts can be wrong. So in other words, what I'm saying is, certainly I'm going to give you my opinion in the next couple of minutes based on what we have at the moment in chatbots such as ChatGPT. And I'm going to tell you where I think things are going and how we ought to do things, but please bear this disclaimer in mind. The fact that some of us are working on these tools does not necessarily mean that we have a good sense of exactly where these tools are going and what we can do with it. Having said that, let me then start off with the first point that I want to make. I've already kind of alluded to this. We as humans are easily fooled when it comes to machines looking as if they can think in the way in which we do. So what I have on the slide in front of you at the moment is a tool called ELIZA that was designed in 1966 by a computer scientist, or actually electronic engineer at that point, called Joseph Wiesenbaum. He was at MIT. Now, ELIZA is a mock Rogerian psychotherapist. It's essentially a version, well, I mean, in some sense, you can also almost think of it as looking like ChatGPT. You type information into it, into the tool, and it responds. But in this case, the idea is that it's supposed to be responding like a Rogerian psychotherapist would. So, for example, here's a very simple example. ELIZA might start by asking you, is something troubling you? And then someone could, the person conversing with it could reply something like, men are all alike. And then ELIZA would respond by saying, what is the connection, do you suppose? The answer could be, they're always bugging us about something or other. So there's a conversation here that would typically be held by a psychotherapist with a patient. Now, Wiesenbaum made it very clear when he designed this system that it's a very simple system that's run by a couple of very simple rules at that point. Nevertheless, it turned out that quite a number of people got to some extent addicted to the system and started conversing with it as if it was a human. Even though all of us knew that this is not necessary, that this was not the case. So the point I'm simply making here is that even if we know something can't really think, we tend to, in some sense, anthropomorphize this. And I think it's important for us to bear this in mind as we continue. So let me give you one quick other example of ChatGPT in action. Again, I'm not going to go through all the details here, but I want to give you a sense of the strange mistakes that ChatGPT can sometimes make. So I work, amongst other things, on something called KLM-style defeasible reasoning. So it's a technical version, it's a technical sub-area of AI. And when I asked ChatGPT what this is, it started off fairly reasonable by saying that KLM-style defeasible reasoning is a type of non-monotonic reasoning that involves reasoning with exceptions or defeaters. That is quite true. And then it makes the following strange statement. It says the term KLM stands for the last names of the 3 logic researchers who developed this method, which is also true, but then it gives their names, or at least it gives 3 names, Karlsruhe, Delft, and Van Bentem. Now, you can clearly see that even though it has the K correct, by the way, Karlsruhe is not the correct logician there, but when it comes to Delft and Van Bentem, it's not quite clear how the L and the M would relate to the last names of these 2 researchers. Now, again, the point I'm trying to make here is that for us to understand what's going on here, you need to go back and think about the fact that what we're seeing here is something that is essentially a probability distribution over sequences of words. So we as humans would immediately see that there's a problem here because the first letters of the 3 surnames that are given here are not K, L, and M. But somehow ChatGPT doesn't figure this out. And again, as I say, this might be puzzling to you unless you take yourself back to what ChatGPT actually is. So with all of that, then let me quickly go through some of these questions that we were looking at to answer. So the first question here is what we think the impact in the next 10 years will be. And as you can see over here, I'm going to give very short responses over here. Of course, there will be time later on to talk about this in more detail. So the impact in the next 10 years, in my view, we will start using these systems as assistive tools. Think of it as super calculators. In fact, thinking back to calculators is a very nice analogy as well. Initially, when people started using calculators, there were all kinds of questions about whether this is going to have a major effect on people's arithmetic abilities and similar concerns. In the end, it turned out that calculators are enormously useful for us because it takes away some of the drudgery for us when we're doing the arithmetic calculation. Of course, it hasn't really affected people's arithmetic abilities. The only thing is we need to take this into account in a proper way. So, for example, when students write exams, in some cases, we don't give them access to calculators. In other cases, we do, depending on the circumstances. So I think certainly in the next 10 years, tools such as ChatGPT will more and more be used as assistive tools, things that can help us. Will AI change the peer review process? That's the next question. Again, in my opinion, it will certainly have an effect on many policies when it comes to peer review, but I don't think it's going to change the peer review process dramatically. And I base this opinion on the way in which, well, automation, various versions of automation has had an effect, certainly in computer science, on the peer review process. And I'll give you a very simple example of that. These days, when you submit to certainly an artificial intelligence conference, and by the way, in the AI field, conferences are regarded as prestigious as journals. These days, if you submit a paper to an artificial intelligence conference, your paper is reviewed by human reviewers, of course, but then there is a rebuttal process where, and this is all happening online, you get your reviews back, you have a chance to provide a version of rebuttal, after which the reviewers look at this again, and all of this is happening online. So this is very different from the way in which, say, journals handle things, or even conferences handle things 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. So that type of automation has had an effect on the peer review process, but the overall process has remained the same. And I think the same thing will happen, at least in the foreseeable future. I would say that the biggest benefits of AI in general, certainly of tools such as ChatGPT, is this idea of removing the drudgery from scholarly writing and publishing, making it easier for you to phrase things in appropriate ways. Now, the downside and the risks of AI, in my view, this is mostly the potential downsides are the misuse, in my view, mostly unintentional, because of ignorance. If people do not understand more or less how these tools work, you can come to strange conclusions about what they tell you and how to use them. So you'll see on the slide over here, so this is a headline about the Google Vice President warning that AI chatbots are hallucinating. So the term hallucination here refers to the fact really that these chatbots, sometimes they just make things up in some sense. And again, it's very hard to understand why they do this unless you look at this from the view that these are essentially kind of probability distributions, or based on probability distributions. A very simple example of AI being used in scholarly publishing already. So here's something that I picked off the internet, which you might find amusing. So this was in the journal Nurse Education in Practice. You'll see that the title is Open Artificial Intelligence Platforms in Nursing Education, Tools for Academic Progress or Abuse. And you'll see that ChatGPT is listed as one of the authors. So there's a nice instance of self-reference here, ChatGPT being involved in figuring out whether it's a good idea to use ChatGPT. Then how about AI impacting research and data analysis? In general, I think it's certainly the case that ChatGPT and similar tools will have many, many different uses. In some sense, it's early days with these kinds of tools. With other AI tools, it's already the case, and it's clearly been demonstrated that they are extremely useful as long as you use them in appropriate ways, and then as long as you more or less understand what it is that they're doing. I'm acutely aware that my 20 minutes is almost up, so I will quickly go through these last questions, because I'm pretty sure we're going to come back to many of them. Will AI replace human writers? I think it's most unlikely, mostly because AI tools lack comprehension. Are there any ethical concerns? Most certainly. The most important ones are bias. If the data that such a tool is fed is biased, then the tool itself is going to be biased, and we need to look at that. And then this idea of hallucination, making stuff up in a sense. The skill and knowledge to work with AI, it's crucial for all of us to have basic AI literacy. And I know that the University of Johannesburg, for example, has started with a basic AI course for everyone at the university. I think it's an excellent idea, and other universities should look at something similar. The impact on measuring success of publications, I think these measures will be adjusted as we understand the capabilities better, but it's not something to be majorly concerned about, in my opinion. Examples of AI tools used in scholarly writing and publishing. I've already shown you the publication in the Nursing Journal. Here's something interesting. The first one that I know of dates back to the 1960s, where an automated theorem prover was put up as an author of a mathematics paper. Effective tracking of text prepared with AI. It's really early days. There are tools for there are tools and companies that will tell you that it can figure out whether something was written by a chatbot or not. That is not in general true, but these tools, I expect them to become more mature as we continue. There will be a version of an arms race in developing these tools. Should bots be listed as authors or acknowledged differently? I think they should be acknowledged differently, mainly because their responses may change over time and the sources that they use are unknown. We don't really understand how they do this. And also, as I say, they make stuff up. So it's a little bit tricky to list them explicitly as authors. How should South African journals in general address this? I think it is best to think of it as an evolving process. And here I really like the title of this little article, which I think most of it was based on what Dr. Rose Phillips had said. And it's this idea of calming your inner Luddite, but keeping your inner skeptic. Don't be too worried about changes, but make sure that you understand exactly how to deal with these changes. And then lastly, the last point that I want to make, and this is something that I started off with as well, is that ChatGPT and deep learning in general is not all of AI. It's certainly a very important part of AI, but AI contains a number of other important pillars as well. And one of them is logic-based work. And here's a nice little title from an article in the MIT News. It's certainly the case, as I mentioned, that large language models are biased. And it may well be that making use of formal logic can help us to reduce or mitigate that kind of bias. So that was the last slide, and I'm then going to hand over to Mike again. Let me just stop sharing. There we go.
There we go. Oh, thanks, Tommy. That was it was fascinating and really laid the foundations for the subsequent webinar. So thank you so much. You will notice that there are 4 questions for you. So perhaps you can mull over those. So when we start the Q&A at the end, you've had a look at the questions and can respond to the people that have posed them there.
I'll do that. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. All right. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Professor Twala, who's a renowned academic and expert in the field of artificial intelligence and data science. He currently serves as the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Digital Transformation and a professor at the Tshwane University of Technology. Prior to his current role, he served as the Executive Dean of Engineering and Built Environment at the Durban University of Technology in South Africa. Before joining that position, he held the position of Director of the School of Engineering at the University of South Africa and founded the Institute for Intelligent Systems at the University of Johannesburg. Professor Twala earned his PhD from the Open University in the UK in 2005 and conducted postdoctoral research at Brunel University, primarily focusing on the application of theoretical and applied machine learning in software engineering. Professor Twala's current research interests include promoting and conducting research in artificial intelligence within the big data analytics field and developing innovative solutions to crucial research problems in this area. He's been a leading force in improving science through big data since the late 90s and has presented his work at numerous conferences and seminars. He has a world-class track record of high-quality research and scholarship, as evidenced by his more than 180 publications in internationally leading journals and conferences. Additionally, he has directed over 30 PhD theses in the area of machine learning and engineering science. Professor Twala currently serves on several editorial boards, including information sciences, environmental science, intelligent data analysis, data science, big data, and the Journal of Image and Data Fusion. He is also a member of several professional bodies, including the Royal Statistical Society, and is a registered professional natural scientist. Over to you, Professor Twala.
Thank you very much for the nice welcome. Let me try and share my slide. Can everyone see my slide?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not in full screen mode.
Is it final?
There we go.
Okay. Okay. I think the first speakers just highlighted key things that are very useful in terms of where AI is taking us. Obviously, as he has mentioned, it's just an application, and we say that it's how you utilize it that determines as to whether it's effective or not. So my topic will just be looking at how where AI, and I call it its ChatGPT because the ChatGPT involves some application of AI, and as to whether we want to follow. Especially in the higher education sector. Just a breakdown of how ChatGPT works. First stage, it doesn't involve direct human feedback. The model learns the structure of language by regurgitating vast volumes of text from the web, for example, sentences. It could come from paragraphs from Wikipedia, Twitter, Reddit, Business Day, our own South African Business Day, and so on, and all different languages. Then the second stage now, which we generally call self-supervised learning, where human annotators get involved in the training of the model to become kind of like a more sophisticated. So you write responses to various type of queries ChatGPT receives. So the model learns and performs that kind of like commands that are related to sort of like write an essay on a specific topic or even revise a certain paragraph. How have I been experimenting with ChatGPT? It can be an excellent writing and brainstorming tool. I mean, I've been able to write a summary of an idea I have in mind and ask ChatGPT to expand it. Of course, it's going to be more sophisticated, and then but manage to pick up results and develop them myself and continue using it. So that has been my current experimentation of that. As one Twitter I which picked up, which is called ChatGPT as the e-bike for your brain, because it just helps you sort of like to open up your mind in things that you do each and every day. The attention and press that it's been getting, it's obvious. I mean, for me, it's another milestone for AI. The fact that it has progressed and it deserves to be celebrated, because time and time again, you always see AI as this creature that's here to destroy humankind, that's here to do all sorts of things, take people's jobs and stuff like that. But there are good things that AI sort of like make some strides in. I'm not going to dwell into those, but the whole point here is that it just deserves to be kind of like celebrated. However, I do worry about overhyping the state of AI. I mean, progress has been made, there's general intelligence on it, but it's still not on the horizon. For me, it's like we still have a lot to kind of like do in terms of moving forward. So obviously, I do sort of like explain intelligence has always been a moving goalpost and is likely to remain one, but I'm excited by the progress. I mean, when you talk about ideas from time to time, you're bound to come up with new ideas all the time as well. So it's very important that as we look into this kind of like new technologies, we keep that in mind. There are shortcomings. I'm not gonna go around and saying that they are not. For example, as you know from my slides, you can see that I'm a great Pirates fan. If you type which last tournament did Pirates win, it will make up an answer for you. I mean, obviously they did win the MTN Cup, and of course they would have loved to win the next cup. I think it was the Netbank or something like that. But the model gets confused by the two notations, whereby wanted to win and versus won. So those are the things that can always come up. But at the end of the day, it does this so fluently. I said it can give you garbage, but it's such fluent and coherent language that if you aren't an expert in that domain, you might believe what it's saying is true because of the manner that it presents to you. That worries me. And I think we humans are sort of like gullible in the face of seemingly well articulated output. So that's where we are in terms of the shortcomings. What's exciting about it? We now have tools that can generate creative, fluent language, which has been a challenge for years now. As an AI scientist, my excitement is about the next steps. We have new problems in order to utilize AI, and we can able to solve those problems. I'm less excited about AI's goal, reverse engineer human intelligence, and about AI or intelligence augmentation as well. I think it's worthwhile, sort of like a goal, to use it to enable humans to sort of like to do better things and augment human capacity. But at the end of the day, the collaborative kind of like work in terms of the systems that we work on is kind of like exciting in terms of moving forward. So how I see technology evolving. I mean, as I said, right, still in the midst of this change, but we'll continue to make sort of like language models more kind of like efficient as well. If you look at models, will be your assistants for web navigation, accomplish sort of like various mundane web tasks that we carry out each and every day of our lives. Yeah. So the same set of technologies also, that's where we can see them involving in terms of like ChatGPT, in terms of the manner that things are working on. So how will ChatGPT transform higher education institutions? As someone who's in the higher education, I look at it as, imagine being able to write a research paper and essay with the help of GDP. You simply provide the model with the thesis statement, key points, and ChatGPT generates sentences and ideas based on your input. This will help you overcome the writer's block and generate original sort of like arguments. I mean, I'm not saying you should paraphrase, but it gives you that extra thing in terms of the way that you think in terms of moving forward. Also, imagine being able to quickly review a large number of academic articles just by using ChatGPT to generate a summary of abstracts. We call that systematic review. ChatGPT can able to sort of like assist you in that regard, and also assume generating practice questions for exams and quizzes for our students, and allowing us to test our knowledge and prepare upcoming assessments. ChatGPT can be able to do that. There are dangers in using this. For example, reproducing biases and stereotypes in existing data that has been trained. Another concern is the potential for ChatGPT to reduce human interaction. Obviously, just relying on a chat box, you just type and information comes flowing in. That human interaction is always going to be missing. But that's the case now, even with online learning and hybrid, whereby that human interaction now has been sort of like affected, when in fact it's critical, especially when you want to sort of like transfer knowledge to students. Of course, by relying on machine learning model, generating responses and questions, students and educators may be less likely to engage directly with each other, which is very important, especially in engineering and science, working together as a team and that kind of like interaction. So here are potential applications for those who are interested. Obviously, students can reflect on articles produced by ChatGPT. Students can set assignments that require them to compare ChatGPT's answers. ChatGPT can be used to support essay writing. Students can be encouraged to consider the extent to which their use of ChatGPT has enabled or constrained access to powerful knowledge. For me, it's very important that we can see that things that we can apply just by using ChatGPT. So what else can academic use for ChatGPT? I was not here. What I did, I just typed that question on ChatGPT. Look what it gave me. To avoid ChatGPT being used for cheating, there are a few different steps that educators and institutions could take. For example, they could educate students and educators on the ethical use of AI technology, develop guidelines and policies for the use of ChatGPT in academic work, monitor the use of ChatGPT in academic settings, use ChatGPT in ways that support learning and academic achievement, incorporate critical thinking and ethical reasons into their curriculum to help students develop skills and habits to use ChatGPT. This information is something that I got directly from ChatGPT, just to show you that things that you can able to sort of come about it. Then what are the issues? I mean, copyright. Obviously, if you submit a conference session proposal to ChatGPT, do you need to acknowledge it? I mean, that's a question that you always come about. So of course, you'll have to start to see it as a kind of like appearing as a co-author academic. Again, I typed that on ChatGPT, and this is what it gave me. As a language model, I don't have to I don't have the ability to grant permission for use of my answers, blah, 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 blah. Plagiarism is a serious offense and can have serious consequences. So it is important to properly credit the sources of any information that you use in your work. That's in relation to copyright. However, this isn't new. I mean, we've had chatbots all the time. I mean, I know one that's called Rightful, there's Acra, there's ToWrite, there's Co-author. All this kind of like open AIs are kind of like a chat boxes have always been there. It's only that now they've come up with one that sort of like sets it apart from the rest that have already been developed. So it shows that people have been experimenting with this thing, and at the end of the day, we still have to expect more to come up of it, as long as if we keep on sort of like trying to make things more efficient in terms of moving on. Yeah. So in conclusion, ChatGPT has become one of the most significant changes to hit colleges and universities since Google was launched in 1998. I'm sure when Google was launched, we always had queries or questions about it. Why doing some Google to be able to search? But you see the impact it has made in sort of like in recent years as well, and changed the research game forever. Now you can Google, you can do Google papers, you can do abstracts, anything that you want. Google researchers and stuff that you do all the time. Society and education sector, I always say that we squandered an opportunity that COVID presented to us on what higher education was for and how assessment might be used to enhance learning. So those are things that we need to come to think about from time to time. So rather than signaling the end of higher education, ChatGPT has instead presented the sector and society more broadly with another opportunity. So this is a chance to develop innovative and inclusive teaching and learning and assessment aligned to such understanding. And lastly, as with most technologies, I started with this comment. The challenge is not the technology itself, but rather our human emotions, experience, and reaction to it. But remember this, higher education has faced new technologies before, and they've emerged better than ever. A quote I got from online whereby they say, "Pretend you're an AI who loves me." That's by John Stuart Chill. And with those words, I thank you for listening, and questions obviously and comments would be most welcome. I'm not sure whether now or later on, but thank you very much. This was my talk today.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Kwala. It was really, I learned a lot, and I think your overriding theme was one of being positive. And I think in my personal interactions, I've come across a lot of skeptics who think that it's the end of higher education. And I think you've proved all the skeptics wrong with evidence. And I think there'll be lots to talk about in the question and answer session. I note that there are several questions posed to you. So I wonder if you could also just read through those in preparation for when we move on to the Q&A, so that you can address them after giving them a bit of thought. Thank you once again. All right, I'd like to introduce the third speaker of the day, and that's Dr. Senekal. He's been affiliated with the University of the Free State since 2008. And is presently a research associate in the Department of Computer Science and Informatics. He earned his PhD at the University of the Free State in 2013 and subsequently conducted research in information technology, big data, and network science. Dr. Senekal is a highly respected researcher and has been recognized with an NRF rating. He has published over 80 articles and 4 books, solidifying his reputation as an accomplished scholar in this field. So thank you, and over to you, Dr. Senekal.
Thank you. I'm not going to talk too technically about this. I think this is an interesting topic that deserves further study in an article, perhaps. But first of all, when ChatGPT was released on the 30th of November last year, one of the main concerns was, will students use this to cheat? And by extension, of course, academics as well, because academics also cheat. Now, I think this is a valid concern. people have a tendency to be dishonest. And as a result, there are numerous tools that have already been developed to recognize AI-generated content. I could name some of them, but a simple Google search will find them for you. One of those tools, the GPT-2 output detector, which was developed by OpenAI, which also developed ChatGPT, I came across a study that looked at its ability to recognize AI-generated content. And unsurprisingly, AI is good at recognizing AI content. Humans are not. Now, I should mention that in another study, the researchers found that if you add an additional step by paraphrasing the text, then it becomes more difficult for the tool to recognize the content as such. So the tools exist, but they are not infallible. Tommy Meyer referred to an arms race. I'm sure there will be an arms race between AI generation and tools that can recognize it. Now, in our foreseeable future, we should be seeing a lot more technological developments. I came across a study by Seville et al., where they looked at the development of processor speed in terms of Moore's law. As you probably know, Moore's law says that processor speed doubles every 2 years. And they found that from the 1950s up until 2010, development more or less followed Moore's law. But after that, we're seeing an acceleration. Now, we see that acceleration in tools such as ChatGPT, which continues to surprise me and everyone I talk to. But also, we saw Google present their Bard and Microsoft present their Bing chatbot in February this year. And both those tools are seemingly better than ChatGPT. We talked about, some of the previous speakers talked about hallucinations. I've seen ChatGPT tell me long stories that are just completely made up. Whereas when I tested Microsoft Bing, that never happened. And also, ChatGPT was trained on a vast amount of data, but the cutoff point is 2021. Google's Bard and Microsoft Bing, that will provide a user interface to whatever is on the web, and it will be up to date. In one of my tests, Bing cited a source that was 42 minutes old. So with these two large tech giants, clearly in an AI arms race, and against the background of increasing technological development since 2010, we should be seeing major progress within the next few months to a year. Tommy Meyer also mentioned that ChatGPT announced on the 15th of March that they're now shifting to the GPT-4 model. You'll remember when it was originally released, it was the GPT 3.5 model. So new model means new opportunities. It can do image recognition, and it should improve accuracy as well. So what all of this means for us is a more challenging environment to differentiate between human and machine generated text. Now, there are some universities overseas and some journals that have completely banned ChatGPT and other chatbots from generating text. Now, while I don't have particularly strong feelings about it, I do wonder what the point is to teach students in such a way that what they can do is within the capabilities of any form of AI. because it doesn't take an employer long to figure out that his newly appointed graduate employee can be replaced by an online tool for free. So I think we need to teach students and ourselves to keep outperforming the technology. Also, the same thing applies to a researcher. If your paper could be written by AI, then why are you earning incentives? We need to stay ahead of the technology. Now, in order to do that, I think two things that everyone in academia should do is, first of all, familiarize yourself with the technology, and then secondly, find ways of co-opting it. Now, in terms of the first one, ChatGPT isn't equally accurate across fields. I've seen papers where people found that ChatGPT can actually pass a medical exam. But if I ask it to give me a synopsis of an Afrikaans film, it fails dismally. So that's why everyone needs to look at what ChatGPT can do in their field specifically. And that will involve personal experiments. I would have thought that most people would have done that by now, but I talk to people and I see not everyone has actually investigated its abilities for themselves. And also have a look at research that's been done on ChatGPT. When I checked Google Scholar yesterday, there were, I think, over 6,000 publications on ChatGPT already. That way you can maybe find an application you haven't thought of. Now, when you know what the technology can do, you have to remember that it will be updated. So we'll have to keep refreshing our knowledge of what technology can do at the moment. But once you know what it's capable of doing in your field, you can start looking at how to turn what's essentially a threat into an asset. Now, in the classroom itself, sometimes when ChatGPT gives you reliable answers and truthful answers, maybe you can refer students to the platform kind of like a tutor. If it's not giving reliable answers, maybe you can use ChatGPT to teach critical skills. Language learning is, of course, an important topic with these kinds of technologies. Although ChatGPT does offer support in various languages, it's particularly good in English, which could be valuable in South Africa, where our de facto national language has become English, but English is only the first language for a very small minority. So using ChatGPT for English language proficiency could be useful. It could be used for developing lesson plans, generating questions, even semi-automated marking. All of these are options to explore, not something to be implemented without question, of course, but these could be options to streamline the teaching process, which then leads to more time for research. Now, in terms of research itself, I came across an interesting article where the authors used ChatGPT to formulate a Boolean query for a structured literature review. When I saw that, I thought that's the way we should be thinking about ChatGPT. Use it to better our research, not to cut corners and try to churn out as many papers as possible. So I still have to think about similar applications. I also found that ChatGPT is really good at explaining complicated topics simply. Now, let me give you an example. I initially studied literature, And statistics is not part of our literature courses at all. But the digital humanities is gaining ground, and then statistics become relevant. But if you encounter statistical concepts and you want to go straight to a paper you found on Google Scholar, that's a nightmare. ChatGPT could explain a concept for you in simple terms, and then it helps you interpret more authoritative sources. Also, this could help break down barriers between disciplines, especially with interdisciplinary research. We in the humanities don't always understand what people in economics are saying, and vice versa. I don't know what someone in physics really understands about, let's say, critical race theory, just like the person in the humanities doesn't understand statistics. But by using ChatGPT, you can at least get an idea of what the concept is about. I found that it's more accurate when talking about global concepts, so rather than local ones. So I wouldn't recommend someone asking ChatGPT about Afrikaans literature, but Pearson's correlation coefficient, it will probably give you an accurate answer. Now, when it comes to the actual composition of a paper, that's where the ethics come in. There, I want to remind people that we have been using AI. If you're using Microsoft Word or Google Docs, the spell checker and grammar checker is based on a large language model. It's also AI-assisted writing. And when that came in a few years ago, that was not considered to be unethical. Now, how about if you use ChatGPT to generate a summary? Is that unethical? I would say no. It's not a significant intellectual contribution, and it's still based on your own work. If I had to review a paper and I found out that the summary was generated by ChatGPT, I also wouldn't reject it. My logic there is, if I had asked a human to do that, would I need to acknowledge that person as an author? And I don't think so. But if it's a literature review or interpreting the data, then it becomes more difficult. At the moment, ChatGPT cannot generate a literature review. I tested it. I also came across a study that did the same thing, and they found exactly what I found. It looks great, but all those sources are made up. Also, I looked at the types of studies I do, and I can't see how ChatGPT can gather or analyze any of that data. But its capabilities are changing. So at some point, a line will be crossed. And I don't know what exactly that line is. I was hoping somebody could tell me what that line is. But circling back to whether ChatGPT should be banned, I would say that even if South African universities and journals banned its use, I will always keep an eye on it, and I will keep updating my understanding of its capabilities, because I don't want to be made redundant. And I think there's a definite possibility that with the speed at which technology is advancing, some of our tasks will be taken over by ChatGPT or similar technology. And I need to know what it does in order to outperform it. And that's basically all I need to say today. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Dr. Senegal. Lots of practical information and tips and very pragmatic suggestions as well. Okay, so now we move on to the Q&A section, and I anticipate that this is going to be, hopefully there's going to be a good bit of interaction, and I think this is where a lot of learning will take place as well. We already have 18 questions, so I think my job will be to try and just keep us on track. We've got about 50 minutes to participate in this Q&A section. So I think what I suggest is let's just start at the beginning and work our way through. Some of the questions have already been answered, so we can skip those. But and then some of the questions are duplicates as well. So I'll just use my judgment to try and work our way through the list, starting up at the top. And maybe the responses will generate further questions or responses from the other panelists. So can I ask all the panelists to turn on your mics and your videos, please? And then let's get cracking. So, all right, so the first question is, I'd like to know, how do we ensure that creativity and innovation is not hampered by the advent of AI in academic writing? I think that was addressed in some of the talks, but would anyone like to just give a nice, concise response to that question? Tommy?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Since the question was asked while I was talking, maybe I can just add another dimension to this as well. I think the answer is that it's relatively easy to ensure that it's not hampered. And I want to give an analogy. In the early 1980s, the game of chess was conquered by AI, in the sense that at that point, AI became clearly and demonstrably better than humans at playing chess. And at that point, there was a lot of hand-wringing about what this is going to do with the game of chess. Is it now just machines that are going to play chess against each other, and are they going to leave humans behind? It turned out that was actually a kind of catalyst for human chess playing. So certainly there's a distinction now between humans playing chess against humans and humans playing chess against machines. But when we're talking about human-to-human chess, it's really the way in which machines play chess has added value to chess playing by humans in general, because essentially what happened is that new strategies that humans had never thought of came up and were analyzed by and used by machines, were analyzed by humans, and it's actually upped the quality of chess playing of humans. And I think we can learn something from that more generally as well. It comes down to the same, or back to the same point of thinking of these tools as assistive tools. They can help us to do things. They can help us to be more creative and innovative.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's a lovely analogy with the chess. I hadn't thought of that before. Tommy, since the next question was also posed while you were talking, have you had a chance to look at it? Let me just read it in case some people don't have access to the questions. So the question is directed to the present presenter, that was Professor Meyer. Is it true that ChatGPT has the potential to infringe on the privacy of individuals? Also, if universities and other academic institutions embrace, how do we make certain that students from poor backgrounds are not left behind? So there's quite a bit to that question.
So I can tell you what I think. So in some sense, it's two different questions, right? So I'll try to address both. The first one, is it true that ChatGPT has the potential to infringe on the privacy of individuals? I'm reasonably sure that if you ask ChatGPT about this, it'll just tell you, I'm just a large language model. I can't infringe on anything, which might sound like a cop-out. But in some sense, it does speak to the point. I mean, directly speaking, no, ChatGPT does not have the potential to infringe on the privacy of individuals. Of course, in some sense, it has indirectly, because it has access to what's on the web. It has access to a whole lot of information. So there might be information that talks about you as an individual that ChatGPT could access. But other than that, it's in some sense, it's not a new threat. There's the possibility of your privacy being infringed if there's stuff about you out there on the internet. I don't think ChatGPT there makes a huge difference. The second question, if universities and other academic institutions embrace ChatGPT, how do we make certain that students from poor backgrounds are not left behind? I think it's a very important question. But again, it does not just relate to ChatGPT. When we're talking about any new technology, the question always comes up, how do we make sure that this does not increase inequality in society? And while I think it's an important question, I think the question goes way beyond ChatGPT. As I say, it has to do with technology in general. It's a very important question, and most of these technologies have the ability to ensure that we can reduce inequality. But it's up to us as humans to make sure that these technologies are used in the right way.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. I think that's a really good, clear answer to that question. The next question, I'm going to take a stab at it, and then the experts can add in and correct me if I'm wrong. But the question is, what are the chances that an AI-authored, AI-assisted paper also generates high similarity or plagiarism? Just for those people not familiar with the publishing process, when a paper is submitted for review, it gets checked for the degree of similarity, and there are various programs that can be used for this. Turnitin is a popular one, and then the ASSAF's journals use a program called Authenticate, and it draws upon data that's already exists in various databases on the internet. So if the paper is the same as data that's already been published and exists in databases, then that will come up as similarity. And obviously, if there's whole-scale plagiarism, then the degree of similarity will be high. My understanding, and I'm open to correction, is that with AI-generated work, it won't just cut and paste from databases. It will synthesize and then present it. So the chances of it coming up as plagiarism will be quite low. So that's my view. I'm open to being corrected if I'm not correct. Anyone, Professor Chwala, do you want to have a stab at that?
Yes, I can add on that. I think we also we should be aware that they do allow a certain percentage of similarity. I think it's 20%. Most journals, yeah. So, but in terms of plagiarism, it will be low. It's only the similarity that will pop up from time to time if you just copied and paste whatever ChatGPT gave you. So that's where the problem lies. And obviously that paper will be rejected depending on the level of the similarity index. Thanks.
Yeah. I see this being a problem at maybe school or junior levels at university, where pupils and learners they have a goal of passing. They're not really aspiring for developing skills. I think at university, at higher levels, I would like to think that students are trying to develop skills, and the abuse of using these various tools will be less. Well, they'll be used in a more creative way. But I think time will see whether that is true. Okay, the next question, I think we have addressed this. Justine, this question was posed before Professor Chwala was speaking, and he did speak about ethics. So if you feel your questions haven't been resolved, can you just be a bit more specific, and we will get to it as we work our way through. And then the next question is, could ChatGPT be useful in helping authors finding relevant references for their publications? I think we have touched on that as well, but would anyone like to just summarize a response to that?
Yes, I can say something.
Yeah. Okay.
ChatGPT can be used for finding the best references. I happened to test it yesterday on a new field that I have to study now. And I just asked him, explain this field and explain to me which authors I need to look at. and it gave me a list of names. It could be really useful in that sense.
Yeah.
Just
I think
to
we
top,
have existing tools that. Sorry,
yeah,
you
just
go ahead.
to top it up, I did talk about systematic review, where ChatGPT can be very useful, because most of the time we always confuse literature review to systematic review. Systematic is more specific on a certain topic, and that will help a lot in terms of those who are doing research in a kind of like a particular field, rather than looking all over the place. You on the key kind of like fields that you're looking at. So it will be very helpful in that. So you don't have to look at 100 papers. It will narrow your search, for example, from 100 to maybe 25 quality kind of like studies. So in that regard, it will be very useful.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe I can just add a quick point there as well. So I agree with the other two speakers that it can be useful. As long, again, as the person who uses it, as long as they understand the limitations of these bots. Firstly, the suggestions that can be made, some of them will not be appropriate. Some of them will not exist, and there is no guarantee that the suggestions for references are really representative. So as long as that's borne in mind, I think it can be extremely useful.
All right, thank you. The next question is, how can transformers and closed data sets help the accuracy of scholarly writing? I'm afraid one of the experts are going to have to address this. I don't quite understand the question, but that's probably through my ignorance. Any suggestions?
It's not clear, the question, yeah.
How
I think the question is not
transformers and
clear.
closed data sets help the accuracy of scholarly writing? I think maybe perhaps we need a bit of refinement on this question. So would you mind just refining this, please? Just trying to be a bit more specific, and we will get to it. So if you rephrase it, we'll get to it as we work our way through.
Mike, sorry to interrupt. I see Caroline has her hand up, has had her hand up for a while now. Would you like her to maybe?
Yes, please.
Talk?
I didn't
Caroline?
realize. Yeah, sorry, I didn't see you.
No problem. Caroline and William. Caroline, you can speak. Unmute yourself and speak. Caroline? Okay, you need to unmute yourself. Otherwise, maybe we can move to William. What do you think, Mike? I can allow him to talk. And sure. Mike, you can unmute yourself. Sorry, it seems as if I had trouble.
Yeah.
If
they put their questions, if they can try and summarize them, we'll get to them.
Yes. Please continue.
Okay. All right, then I think the next question about the accuracy increasing, I think we have addressed that. That was addressed a couple of times in the talk. Can ChatGPT mine your device for personal data or information while you are using it? Many websites say it has the potential to be hackers trying to hack your device. So this is where the computer experts will have an opinion.
Yeah, so maybe I can start. It doesn't have the ability to certainly to mine your device. It has access to lots of data, but it doesn't have direct access to mine your device. So I think that's one thing we don't need to worry about. Of course, the information that ChatGPT summarizes can be of use to a hacker, but that's a different matter.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you. All right, the next one, if ChatGPT only uses existing knowledge to generate its responses, it is only working on what is known, or at least written down? Could its extensive use limit the generation of novel ideas? I think this is a very important question, and I've got a response, but let's hear from the experts first.
I can quickly start because I think it relates to what I was saying a little earlier as well, when we were talking about innovation and creation. In principle, I mean, in the end, it depends on us as humans. If I look at what's happened in the past, and again, the chess example is a good example of that, I don't see ChatGPT or any of these tools limiting the generation of novel ideas. In fact, I see quite the opposite. Even though the tool itself might be limited in what it's able to do, it can serve as a catalyst for us as humans.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what I was listening to a podcast, and Kevin Kelly, the author of Wired, was talking about this very point, and he explained it very eloquently. He said, if you're an innovative scientist or writer, you use ChatGPT to help you, but you will raise the bar a tiny bit by using the tool. And then that will contribute to the pool of knowledge. And then the next person comes along and they've got a little bit extra now that you've contributed. And if everyone does the same thing, eventually that pool that the ChatGPT draws upon will be ever expanding. I think if we all just sat and didn't contribute, weren't innovative in how we used it, then this concern would be very real. We'd just be regurgitating general information. But I think, I know a lot of people are concerned about that, and I think it's important to get that message out. Is ChatGPT the future of text messaging as well as Google Assistant? I think anyone? I don't.
Well, maybe I can take a stab at this.
That question will be answered.
Yeah, I can take a quick stab at this. I don't know. I mean, in some sense, even if we go prior to ChatGPT, I don't know how many people have used Google's autocomplete in their email system. It's really quite frightening. Sometimes you start by replying, and what Google provides is pretty much, you know, for short emails, the way I would have responded anyway. So like many other things, I think ChatGPT could be extremely useful to help with responding to many queries. So certainly with, you know, if you need to use text messages to answer bulk queries, that could certainly be useful. But there's the same issue in the end, that while ChatGPT might be very useful in certain circumstances, it does not have common sense the way we as humans have. And it's very unlikely that in the near future, these tools will be developed to have true common sense. So in the end, there has to be a version of curation by humans.
Yeah, thank you. All right, the next question, I think we have touched on it in the talks, but let's just get a nice summary just for those people who might have missed it. Are the likes of ChatGPT in harvesting, in brackets, stealing intellectual property from the inputs given to the tools, such as when using the tools to write code? Well, so I think that's the first question. And then the second question is, are they also collecting data that can compromise privacy? I think we've answered that question. So let's just focus on the first question. Stealing intellectual property, particularly with code. So who wants to have a go at it?
I can take a quick shot at this as well. I mean, in general, I think this again relates to what someone is willing to put out there. So it's certainly the case that if you present something to ChatGPT, it might be out there, or if you make available information publicly somewhere on the internet so that ChatGPT or similar tools can get access to it, there is in principle the intellectual property problem, but it's not specific to ChatGPT. It has to do, I think, more generally with the way in which data is managed and curated. So I think this in fact touches on a number of issues, such as ethics as well, where some questions are now popping up about whether ChatGPT poses a threat to some aspects, such as IP rights, or maybe some let's say, bias-related issue. And while these are valid concerns, they are more general concerns with the way in which technology is being used at the moment. So I think it's a mistake to focus specifically on whether ChatGPT is problematic in that sense. What we need are more general policies to deal with these problems more generally when it comes to the use of technology.
Yeah, thank you. So the next question, I think Dr. Senekal answered in his presentation, but I'll just read it out, and maybe you can just, Dr. Senekal, just quickly respond to it in the event of someone missing your talk. How do I address this with students who I know are using it when my university is currently ignoring the issue as they wait for our validator to make a decision? I think you kind of answered this. So would you like to just repeat what you said in your talk?
This is strange. I don't actually have an answer to this. I don't know how to address that.
I think, didn't you say in your talk that you would still keep up to date with it, even if there was no if it wasn't openly used?
That could be an answer, yes, thank you. It doesn't help the students themselves if they're not learning anything at university, because they will be outperformed by some form of AI and lose their jobs. So it's important for them to learn, for them personally, for their futures. Yeah,
no, that's a very good retort for someone who wants to bluff it doesn't exist. Yeah, you could lose your job to younger people who embrace it. And so then the next one, I don't know if you're a nightmare for editors, Dr. Senekal, or what the context of that comment, but I hope it wasn't meant in that way. Maybe Jacqueline can just add to that later on, and we will respond to it. I'm sure it was something you said, and then her comment was a nightmare for editors. And then Professor Meyer, this one relates to your talk when you came up with you asked ChatGPT to come up with a summary of yourself, and it had incorrect information. And this question is, can the wrong information be corrected?
It's a very nice and a very useful question. So the answer is no, it can't be corrected directly. So ChatGPT is not Wikipedia. If there's information on Wikipedia about me, I can go and try and correct it myself, and then there will be moderators to look at this. But the way in which ChatGPT works means that no one knows exactly beforehand what it's going to respond, not its developers either. And again, this is an important point that I think we have emphasized, but it's really important to mention that this is the case. The people who have developed ChatGPT, if I were to ask them beforehand, what is ChatGPT going to respond when I ask it, who is Tommy Meyer, they will have no idea. The only way in which they would find out is to interact with ChatGPT. And even if I ask them at the moment, if I ask them to make changes to it, in principle, it's possible for them to curate matters in some general way, in the way in which the designers of ChatGPT has tried to ensure that the tool doesn't make abusive or doesn't give strange or abusive answers to questions. You can't rule that out by the very nature of the way in which the tool is constructed. More generally, I think as we go into the future, there will be more curation taking place. In some cases, automated curation. And by that, I mean the last of my slides, I briefly mentioned to logic-based AI that can serve as a kind of constraint on the way in which these tools are being used. I think we will go in that direction in the end. But at the moment, the answer is no. There's nothing that I can do about the wrong information about me in ChatGPT, and there's very little that the ChatGPT designers can do.
Mike, Susan also has her hand up, and I think just while I have myself unmuted, I just want to say something. It's something I was taught at university. What you put in is what you get out, and what we're going to put into these computers and machines and software is what we're going to get out in the end. So quality in, quality out, garbage in, garbage out. But Susan also has her hand up.
Okay. All right, Susan.
Thank you, Mike, for allowing me some privileges being part of the panel. I would like to know from Dr. Twala, he had such an extreme sort of positive outlook about AI, how we should embrace it, how we should create policies, etc., and how we should direct this thrust of AI in our universities and higher education institutions to rather embrace it than to oppose it. Looking at what you're doing, Prof. Twala, at your institution, then how do you promote good practices and embracements of utilizing the AI tools in general, and specifically these challenges that we are, well, we perceive it as challenges, but then how do you change perceptions and for the institution to embrace what's happening, and then give this thrust then to lecturers to actually execute some sort of calculated practices in teaching, learning, and education? Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I think you're raising a very good point or question. The issue is you always read the bad things about AI, mainly because in our own curriculum, we don't have modules which are related to AI, which is a shame, really, because you can imagine a situation whereby we've got our students now, and one of our strategic pillars at TUT is our students should be future ready. So in 5 years or 10 years time, they should be able to deal with much more advanced ChatGPT. But when you look at the curriculum now as it stands, you ask yourself, will our students be ready? The answer I always pose to students all the time is, do you think what you're doing now will be relevant in 5 or 10 years time? Then they shy away, even staff themselves. So what we're trying to do now at TUT, we're trying to introduce modules because programs, they take a while to introduce. For example, having a data kind of like analytics, kind of like module. First year, all students do it, whether they're doing psychology, philosophy, engineering, or health science, it doesn't matter. You have to do that module so that we can help our students to understand the importance of new technologies or how they can make contributions in their lives. Then we move to the staff as well, because if you talk about future of work in this day and age, you always have to ask yourself that the skills that our staff have now, will they be relevant in 5 years or 10 years time? The answer is no most of the time. So what are we doing to make sure that our staff are relevant? We introduce modules like data science for our staff. Now they're doing introduction to sort of like programming at basic level, not advanced, so that they can understand as to what computing, programming, statistics is all about. So that's the stuff that we are currently doing. But in a bigger kind of like picture, I believe that it's high time we introduce programs like BSc in AI. I mean, there's no university that offers that in South Africa, which is a shame. I'm not sure about even Africa. BSc in big data analytics, something like that, because those are the things that our students will be able to apply at a later stage. I'm sure the other panelists will agree with me that as it stands now, the only contribution we can make is through masters and PhD students through their projects that they do. That's the only experience they get in AI or other kind of like skills that are relevant in terms of running all these new technologies that we're talking about here, or state-of-the-art kind of like technologies. So for me, it's important that we start little and then go big for both staff and students, not just students. I insist on that because we always forget about even our own staff. They need to be equipped with the right skills so that they can able to deal with these things moving on, because that's where we're moving now. 5 years or 10 years from now, you may find that what I'm doing now is irrelevant. So I need to keep on upskilling and reskilling our staff, and also making sure that our problems are relevant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I just comment on that? I think, I think the elderly staff, and I'm in that category, so I can speak openly. I think they're the ones who are most intimidated because they don't understand it and feel perhaps a bit threatened by it. So I think perhaps there could be special courses for the more senior staff members, just to make them understand that it's there to be used in a constructive way, and perhaps help, let them view the seminar and listen to the talks just to see all the positive aspects that can come out of it. It's not, I think the younger people will catch on very quickly and realize the advantages. So I think universities have got lots of work to do with the older staff. Thank you. All right, let's carry on going through the list here. There's a question about IP. The question is, what about IP? I'm assuming the question implies that if you generate something using ChatGPT and publish it, what's the relevance about IP? And I see Susan Feltham is going to answer this question live. So let's move on, and there'll perhaps be a discussion about that a little bit later. Okay,
sorry, Mike.
Would you like to answer it now, Susan?
Sorry, I'm just sort of managing all the questions here from my side, so my intention wasn't really to answer it. I'm a little bit unclear because it's not a full sentence, and maybe again the anonymous attendee can just perhaps put it in full sentence. What I think is being asked is, what about intellectual property rights? In terms of this, but now in some sort of indirect way, it has been answered, because these robots or bots then actually harvest the information. Yes, it is actually a very good question. What about intellectual property rights, etc. But it does seem that there are some loopholes, that it's a very evasive sort of practice of protecting intellectual property rights. I don't really particularly have an answer, and I can pass it over to my colleagues on the panel. But those are just my very first quick ideas about this question.
Yeah. Would anyone else like to have a quick shot at it before we move on? Because we still have a couple of questions to get through in our allocated time.
I can take a quick stab at it, only to tell you that it's a complicated matter. And it's going to remain a complicated matter because, software has been around for what, 50, 60, 70 years. And the whole question about IP and software hasn't really been sorted out from a legal perspective. So the only thing I can say is that it's an urgent matter that needs to be dealt with properly. But if I look at what's happened with software, I'm not overly optimistic that we're going to resolve this in the next 6 months to a year.
Yeah. Well, I'm just seeing it's like the complexity is increased, because just say I, as an author, use ChatGPT to access information, incorporate it into a paper that I publish. When I publish the paper, I've got to sign the IP over to the journal that's publishing it. So now the journal sits with the IP for something that I was a conduit for from ChatGPT. So it does have complexities, and I don't think there's a single simple answer for it. The next question is an interesting one. Will ChatGPT drive the visibility distance between open access and reader pays journals? So in brackets, a knowledge economy question. So I think, I wonder if, my understanding of the question, and you can correct me if I'm understanding it incorrectly, my understanding of the correction is that there are two streams of journals: open access journals and journals that have come, sort of the legacy journals, and you usually have to pay to read those papers. Already there's a gap developing between those two types of journals. And I think the question talks to whether that gap is going to broaden. Maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but please, would someone like to have a shot at answering it?
Issue of journals it's an interesting one because gone are the days where we just publish without having to pay fees. But it appears to me that most of the general impact factor journals have been sort of like doing that. So I don't think it will have a huge impact in terms of that. I don't know what the other panelists think about it.
I agree, Becky. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. I don't see the fact that, you know, whether ChatGPT or not is used or not is going to have a major effect on it.
Yeah, I think if you're using it to generate or to contribute to your research paper, whether you're submitting your paper to open access or the paid version, the process will be the same. All right, the next one is for the academics in the group. Do the esteemed panel members think that the academic conference in fields beyond the computer sciences will see a rise in prestige as a result of AI writing tools? In other words, will showing proof of interiorization of knowledge during a conference, much like a PhD defense, grow again in value?
I can take a quick stab at it, and then it'll be interesting to hear what the other panel members think as well. I don't think it's going to make a big difference, and the reason I'm saying that is that it seems to me that the question is asking that maybe conferences will rise in prestige because now you will have journal papers as opposed to conference papers or presentations where people talk about things written by or with the assistance of AI tools. And the reason I don't think it'll make a big difference is because those journal papers, whether even if they've been or you've been assisted by AI writing tools in writing them, those journal papers need to provide value. They need to add value. So the same, if the journal paper does not have content that adds value to the particular discipline, whether there was a contribution by an AI writing tool or not, the paper itself will not be cited frequently. So my guess is it comes back to the point of that these things are tools that can help us as humans to generate content, but it's up to us to make sure that these actually add value. So I don't think it'll make a huge difference.
Thank you. The next question, I see Dr. Senekal is busy answering it, typing. Maybe you can verbalize your answer. What are the chances in the future that one can upload a written paper to ChatGPT and ask it to proofread for corrections?
Yes, that would be a very useful use of ChatGPT. At the moment, that's not a function. You can't upload anything. It's not like Google Translate. But you could copy and paste the text from your paper into ChatGPT and ask it to correct it. There is a word limit, so you might have to do it in sections. But yeah, it's worth investigating.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, we've got two more questions, and then I think we will hand over to Susan. The next question, I'm also interested to hear the answer. Can ChatGPT access info or provide a summary of articles that are paid journal articles? In other words, behind a paywall. Is it taking into account accredited info out there? So who can one of the experts answer that one, please?
I can give a shot. Oh, go ahead, Becky.
Okay, so the whole point here is it picks anything that's in its database. I mean, it depends. If that page kind of like general was part of that database, then yours is gonna pick it up. But if it's not, obviously, it's not gonna be able to pick it up. That's how it all operates. It picks anything that's in their database. If that page was, then yeah, obviously it's gonna be able to take it up.
Yeah. Okay.
Top it up, Tommy.
Tommy, do you have anything to add?
No, I agree, and maybe the question is, I'm not sure whether the question was a larger one or a broader one.
Yeah.
If it specifically relates to ChatGPT, then it really just depends on what precisely is in the database that OpenAI has, and I'm not entirely sure. But of course, the more general question would be, or the broader question would be, whether it's possible to do something like this with a tool such as ChatGPT. And in principle, it's possible. In principle, it's possible to take that information and add it and to try and summarize it.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we have one last question, and then we'll hand over to Susan. Is the knowledge tree of ChatGPT as the only original resource conceivable? What does such do to academic independence within the judiciary, for example, in court decisions? I'm afraid that's beyond my pay class, so one of you are going to have to address that question.
But it's not entirely clear. So the first part of the question is asking, is a knowledge tree of ChatGPT as the only original resource conceivable? Well, on the face of it, the answer is no, because ChatGPT only uses information that it obtains from whatever is in its database, as Becky was saying it. So there's no way that it can be the original resource. But I'm not sure that's what the person was asking.
Yeah. Okay. Professor Chwala, do you have anything to add on to that?
Or maybe he's looking at the prediction part of things in terms of court cases and stuff like that. I mean, if that's the case, then you can able to predict those court cases, depending on whether in that database there have been historic kind of like decisions on those court cases. Then you can able to predict what's the likelihood that you have this particular age, you have committed this crime, you'll be sent to jail or you will be fined, something like that. So you'll be able to do, if he's looking along those lines, then you can able to do that. But it all depends on historic information, whether it's been stored whereby similar or related cases have been looked at or decisions have been taken on. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. One question has just snuck in. I think we can deal with it very quickly. Dr. Sinekal, can you respond quickly? I'm sure you know the answer to this question.
Yes. The person asked if you could, if you're not fluent in English, use an AI translator and use ChatGPT to correct it. Google Translate has improved significantly in recent years. You need to look at which language pairs are the most accurate. One of the most accurate language pairs happens to be Afrikaans and English. So you could run it through Google Translate and then give it to ChatGPT. It should actually be in fairly good English once it comes out of Google Translate, but there's no reason why you can't copy and paste sections into ChatGPT and see if it can improve on the text.
All right, thank you. All right, and with that, I think let's hand over to Susan and let her wrap up and ask any further questions. Susan, over to you.
Thank you, Mike. So it's really my privilege to close this meeting then. You know, it's such a good opportunity also to showcase ASSAF's talent, and that I mean both Professor Meyer and Professor Twala are both members of the Academy of Science of South Africa. So we're very honoured to have you on this call, and that you have sort of given your little bit, not little bit, but at least some of your time and your energy back to us. That is really great, that we can also showcase sort of the caliber and of the expertise that's part of our membership of the Academy of Science of South Africa. Thank you. So Dr. Sinekal, thank you very much to you too. I hope you've also sort of learned about ASSAf specifically. It was very interesting also to get your views. What I absolutely find amazing of today's presentations are how they flowed into each other and how you each applied your own lens. But what I really enjoyed is the fact that you highlighted all through all your computer sciences, etc., is still the role of universities and what it should play in today's society. I think that's still very important. I did like the idea of the reinvention of individuals, that we should reinvent ourselves and stay current to work and going into the future. But again, just highlighting the amount of advocacy that we have to do and the knowledge we have to create amongst users of the different systems, so that we understand and that we operate from the same premise as such. You also touched upon, Professor Twala, about copyright issues. And I think that was important, just to stress that after all, if we deal with information, there are very important pillars that we have to consider, especially in the scholarly writing and publishing of things, and we cannot negate and move away from that. I think that was also very important. But what really also intrigued me is the innovation that it poses to higher education institutions to move forward. I think in terms of scholarly publishing, I think what is very important, we must not forget the overall purpose of scholarly publishing. And that is the whole stressing of learning and critical thinking. And I think that's a very important objective that universities have to bring about in the authors of their journals, etc., and to ensure through peer reviewing that it actually happens. So it will never replace that, but that we need to use some tools to aid us to advance the objectives and the outcomes of universities and learning, teaching, and education. Then lastly, Mike, I really would like to thank you very much for so eloquently guiding us all through this field. It is really quite an exciting one and a difficult one in some extent. But I think we actually covered a lot of ground and actually far beyond the remit we had for today. So thank you very much for this. And then, of course, to all our participants to this webinar, thank you for your time. We realize that 2 hours are very long out of your day, but you can just see how much attention this has solicited and that we kept busy for the full 2 hours. So I think this shows to you how important it is. I think we can still continue discussing scholarly publishing and ChatGPT and how we should actually how we should deal with that. But I think one other outstanding sort of remark, and I cannot remember who it was, and I think it was Professor Twala, that spoke about policies in institutions, that maybe we also just need to provide a broad framework for authors and for editors, etc., as to how we should embrace these bots in the work that we do, considering that at the moment it can pose some challenges to the work that we do. So, Mike, I'm not sure if you want a last word to say, but from my side, just a very big thank you. Then also to Ina Smith, who orchestrated this whole webinar. It was quite stressful from the side. Our software is not always playing with us, but it played very nicely today. So thank you very much, Ina, for the effort and putting all this together. So Mike, just for the last word, maybe over to you.
Well, just a last word. I'd like to thank the panelists for their very informative talks and for sticking to your time. It made my job so much easier. I didn't have to fidget here to try and remind you that it was time to finish. But thank you for that. And also just for some reason or another, the talks just blended together so nicely. And I thought, even though there was no rehearsal beforehand, it just together very nicely. So thank you all for your contributions. I certainly learned a lot, and I feel excited about the future. I think we should all feel the same way. There's nothing to be intimidated about. I think we have to embrace it. So thank you all. Have a good rest of the day.